Hi everyone. So the other day I had the opportunity to sit down in a 1-to-2 interview with Rod Fergusson, the Diablo franchise manager of Blizzard, and Joe Shaley, the game director for Diablo 4. So I was able to ask some questions about anything in the game pretty much, and I have some pretty interesting insights for you guys to share. I'm going to talk about the main takeaways that we got here regarding the open world design, the instances and the server structure. And also we got a lot of information about the seasonal updates, which are going to be massive the way it sounds. We'll also have a written Maxroll news post up for this interview, and also another one that Rob did with two other lead game designers of Diablo 4. So you have kind of like a mixed post, and you can also read some more of the quotes there and stuff like this. I'm going to be using partly paraphrasing, partly quotes in this video. So I started off with a question asking my interview partners, what is the feature that they enjoy the most about the game? Like, what are they the most proud of in the game? So for Joe Shaley, that was definitely the open world. Like, he was talking about how he really enjoys that the world is the lobby for the game, and he has always like hoped or envisioned this kind of system for a Diablo game as well. So that you log into the game and you are in the middle of a town in Kyovashad or in Saragar or somewhere like that, and you see people walking around. And then you can group up or just go on your own to an adventure, to a dungeon, go out in the open world and explore. And that you have this immersion that comes with being a part of this open world. Personally, I definitely got to agree with this. The open world is a really strong part of Diablo 4 in my opinion. At first, I was actually not very excited hearing that Diablo 4 would be an open world game, but I did actually come to enjoy it quite a lot when I played it now in this press preview access I had. And in general, it definitely has this kind of immersion that Joe described here. Like, you log in, and this is where you select the difficulty. There's a statue in Kyovashad where you can go and then change the world tiers, and then you're in a different difficulty setting without actually ever leaving back to the menu. And just trying to do different activities also doesn't require you to constantly log out and restart the game. Start a new game, for example, for each Nephilim Rift or something like that, or like in D2 where you farm the same zone over and over in a few seconds and then do a new game again. So in Diablo 4 this is all way more streamlined, and you just go in there. There's not even much to do in the menu actually. So when you log into the game, you just see your characters and there's a start game button, and that's basically it. So everything is done directly from the game. And it definitely has exactly this kind of feeling that Joe described. Next, I was asking you to what was the feedback that I have gotten throughout any of the testing phases that really surprised them the most, that maybe led them to rethink some design choices or something like that. So Joe answered this with talking about the local events. He said that the local events really took a lot of time to get it right. They didn't really want to have it so that you go and run around and never find any of those events. But on the other hand, this could also be too much, so that when you do an event, it immediately reappears, maybe because there's too many people running around everywhere. And instead, you need to find the right tuning there. And they said that they are still working on the tuning, but they're pretty close to where they want it to be, so that it feels good in any direction. Rod, on the other hand, answered this question with the renown system. So he said that when people do open worlds for the first time, you learn quickly that complete and absolute freedom is not entirely what people are looking for, because they end up either hyper-focusing on something or constantly getting distracted by something else. And he continued that this renown system gives you this reason to go out in the world and do different activities without really forcing you in one or the other direction. There's simply these objectives that you can go and find, and then they reward you with this renown. And you unlock, for example, extra skill points for all of your characters, so that when you start out a new one, you start with multiple skill points at level 1 already, and you're super powerful, and it's a much easier and a much faster experience to get that one up to speed. Again, personally, I completely agree with what Rod just described with the renown system. I think it's a pretty good system. When I tried it at first, I was kind of surprised that it's not like a 100% completion system. So you don't actually have to go and do every single dungeon and every single side quest in a zone to unlock everything in this renown system. But instead it seems more like you need to do maybe half or so of the total. And this is exactly what Rod described with this renowned system giving you the opportunity to choose what to do, and you don't have to do it all. And once I understood that, it actually made more sense to me. And I think that this renowned system is actually a really good way of giving you some kind of like a reason to go explore, go do different things. And exactly as he described, it doesn't force you to do anything. So it's actually a really good mix. When I played the game, it was nice to go around and finish those renowned objectives because you got pretty significant upgrades with, for example, extra skill points or extra potion slots. And this definitely felt like something you want to do because it's important, but you can do it in any way you want. Next, I asked him about the details about how people get phased together in the open world. So what are the limits, like how many people are in a zone and these kind of things. So Joe replied to this and he explained that there's certain areas that are more socially focused, such as towns. But on the other hand, there's areas where you're supposed to go around on your adventures and it should feel desolate and like your actions actually matter. And you're not supposed to find people all the time out in the open world. So when you go out of town, then you are getting instanced with way fewer people than in town. So that it feels alive in the world when you are like walking around, maybe to group up or to trade or something like that. But instead, when you're actually going out to slay monsters, then you are more on your own in general. And he said, for example, that if you've come across a merchant and they need help fighting off some goatmen, there are not already 5 other people there fighting those same goatmen, because that would really undermine the feeling of the world. So for my personal experience playing the game, I gotta say that it generally did feel quite empty, and I was actually quite happy about this. So this is not like, for example, Diablo Immortal. A lot of people think about Diablo Immortal and how it was there with like very, very small zones, and you had like this server structure where people would just be phased into the same instance, and they would farm each other's monsters in the open world, running circles in the same areas. And this is exactly not what's happening in Diablo 4. So from what I've seen when I played, I did see other people here and there. So yeah, they show up, I don't know, maybe every 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so, I see someone walking around and you just pass each other and that's pretty much it. Or occasionally you actually find someone in the middle of an event and you can kind of just go in and complete it with them and actually take the rewards. So that's kind of neat sometimes. But for the most part, you're mostly on your own. And I gotta say, I enjoyed it much more than this Diablo Immortal approach, where there were just way too many people in each zone. And the number seems to be quite small for relatively large zones in Diablo 4. But on the other hand, there are, for example, these zone events. There's like some bigger event that actually shows up on the map, and it has like a timer when it starts. So it's kind of like an interesting thing to go there and do it. And these are also designed for more people at a time. So there's this Gathering Legions event, for example, and you go there and there's like a whole like stronghold full of like monsters spawning, and then there's some bosses and stuff. And this is definitely something where you actually want to group up, or at the very least have other people around that help you out there. And the same also applies to world bosses, for example. So they also have this kind of timer, and then you can just go there when it pops up, and you can fight the world boss together. And the good part is you don't actually even have to group up with people if you don't want to, or when it's like too clunky, or just for like a minute or two just for doing an event, because you can just like tag enemies together, you share the loot and the XP and all that stuff. It's very convenient. And also, for example, you can just buff each other and debuff the monsters. You don't have to be in a party. I also asked a follow-up question regarding if there's going to be any safeguards in place to prevent abuse of the system, so that, for example, people would fill an entire zone with like lots of people and then do something there together, or like leech an event, or if something just spawned, for example. Or on the other hand, you could have people literally just standing around AFK in order to like block out other people from the zone, so that you can like farm undisturbed. Or you could do this, for example, with like a second, a third or fourth account, etc. Just like invite them all, bring them there into the zone to block others away, and kind of have your own farming spot there. And Joe replied with, yes, there are caps for the number of people that come in any instance. And when we have an event that we think players could be incentivized in a way that's potentially exploitable, such as treasure goblins or world bosses, there are additional controls on that. And the way that we spawn monsters in the game is resistant to a bunch of people standing around being AFK. And Personally, I can actually confirm this. So when I played the game, I was actually farming, for example, a specific rare monster. So this was like one of those unique monsters that we found, and it was actually not really possible to just stand there and farm it, like waiting for the respawn all the time. At the very least, it was very inefficient doing that, unless you want to really just get this one monster and literally nothing else. So I think the respawn was like upwards of a half an hour or so, as long as I was not walking around and doing other stuff somewhere. So it was definitely like a quite dynamic experience, and you're not supposed to just stand in the same place and have like your AFK farming strategy and wake up with like 20 more levels. The last big topic that I have for this video now is the seasonal updates, and those actually seem to be very, very massive. So from what I gathered from both Joe and Rod talking about it, it seems like they are really like working hard on the seasonal updates, with multiple teams working on like seasons in parallel, so that they don't have just this 3-month cycle of a development cycle, but they're kind of like working on the next one already before the previous one is even out. And they seem to have a really large team prepared so that they can just pump out that content post-launch. So Joe said the high-level thing to take away from seasons is they're going to be really big and touch lots of systems, and things like monster types, areas to explore are potential possibilities. We want to really have the game be changing seasonally and feel really new every time there's a new season, in a way that far exceeds what we've done before. We have very ambitious plans for this. And then Rod jumped in and he continued, one of the ambitions is that you feel the season right away, or at least early. So this is not supposed to be like the Diablo 3 style, where sometimes you have a season that only really starts working in endgame once you actually like solo pushing in Greater Rifts or something like that, like hundreds of hours down the line or so. But instead, this is something that should be noticeable, should be changing the game, and should be experienced even at low levels. And then Rod continued, we don't see this as a one and done. D4 is really about building a foundation, and this is how we look at the launch. We want to make sure that this foundation is in place so that we can add interesting seasons and expansions, so that we can take the game different places, because we are going to support it for years to come in a way that other Diablo games haven't been supported in the past. Whatever we're going to put in the box, whatever we're going to launch with, is the start of the journey. That's not the end of it. We're building this base on which to build even more cool stuff. So I gotta say, this was music in my ears. So obviously I expected already that they would put a really big focus on seasonal development, but hearing this again from Joe and Rod, for me, was definitely a really reassuring sign. And I think this is also something that people in general need to understand about the game, that if Blizzard actually delivers on this promise of like really big seasonal updates on a 3-month cycle, which they do seem dedicated to keeping that cycle, it's gonna be an incredible experience, in my opinion. So just the game, the way it works, with the systems it has, with the polishing it has, I think a lot of it hits home in a lot of different aspects, in my opinion. And even if there's maybe not enough at the start, like in terms of end game, or people might feel like there's like too little customization in their gameplay, in their builds, etc. Once they've played like 100, 200, 300 hours or so before the first season start, then there still comes season 1, season 2, season 3, expansion 1, expansion 2, and the game is going to look completely different at some point, I guess. So I imagine it's going to go somewhere along the lines of like the D3 route, where the game launched, and then like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later or so, we got the expansion, and we got many different updates in between. And then the expansion even basically completely changed the game, introducing leaderboards, introducing greater rifts. And we might even see something of that scale happening again in Diablo 4, which launches with, well, way more stuff to do and way more features than Diablo 3 had at launch. So it's already in a pretty solid state, in my opinion, and we're gonna get a lot more, and probably a lot faster than what we know from Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. And those are also pretty much the main takeaways here from this interview that I had with Rod and Joe. I had a pretty good time talking to them. We had a few other like smaller topics, but nothing that I found like really worth putting into this video now in terms of like new information. I'm gonna be releasing a lot more videos regarding Diablo 4 in the next weeks. I have a lot of stuff to talk about, the game systems, the classes, etc. I've already started working on those, so you can go check them out. And aside from that, I also want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Like, what are your impressions? And how do you think this will actually all play out? So, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.